So today's itinerary, we'll be looking at the first place you can benchmark is obviously comparing your performance to past performance, benchmarking against similar organizations, and then actually how to use that data to make the right strategic decisions. And then obviously stuff around some section around goal setting. As I mentioned last week, it was on last week's session, where I will share community data. I'll talk about some metrics and stuff. We don't do that so much in this session. We did a lot more of that last week. So last week I would have been showing examples of, like the source of hire for all 500 organizations that we're working with and things like that. So I'll always show community data rather than one individual client's data for that reason. This week, however, I am going to be showing an example of one individual client's data. Us, hireful. It's the only client's data that we've got permission to share individually. So I'll be showing you one example of that just to make a point about some census data. Okay, so let's look at comparing your performance to past performance. So, past performance is a pretty obvious benchmark. It's probably actually, in some cases, and we'll talk about this in the goal setting area, past performance can sort of lock you down into a setting of setting your expectations really and sort of restrict you to like what you've done previously. But it is an obvious place to start. So you'll see like this is I can't recall exactly which Olympics. I think it's the Paris Olympics. The sort of medal table. And I think this is an easy way to think about it. And Great Britain does really well. A good bang for its buck. But actually, when you think about it, it is for their buck because of the way we fund amateur athletes in this country is very impressive, and obviously it comes across in that medal table. However, there are different ways to look at that data. So if you look at medals based on overall a country's GDP, then you can see sort of Great Britain's down there in 47th place, and you've got some much smaller countries like Jamaica with 9 medals won, but obviously a pretty small GDP. So it's different ways to look at your past performance. So my only point I'm making here is absolutely look at your past performance, but maybe question, is that the best set of data? Is that the best way of looking at things? How would it look if we changed it up and didn't look at this, but we looked at this, that sort of thing. So lots of information that you can work with there. I also want to highlight this as well. If you become very data-led as an organization, and I know you guys are not here necessarily to boost your individual careers, but the more data-led you are as a department, as a recruitment department, HR department, then the better that will stand for you and your career. Because when you come to put down your details on the CV or LinkedIn profile of like, well, what have you achieved? I think more and more organizations now expect, particularly for managers, that they can demonstrate with evidence that what they've delivered, not just that they've delivered, but be quite specific around that. And I always find when I'm running workshops, people that come along and say, well, I inherited nothing. You can almost see the glee on their face. I was the first recruiter into the team. They had no ATS, they had no reporting, they had none of this, because I can just imagine that within 2-3 years, that person would have built the whole infrastructure and possibly might want to move on to their next challenge then, who knows? But they would have, there's so much scope for growth within that. Whereas the person that maybe comes in after those 2 or 3 years, perhaps you could argue has a more difficult challenge to sort of take it to the next level. But there's always, particularly in the AI world we live in, there's always advancements. There's always capacity to sort of push the boundary. So don't be too restricted by past performance. What we're seeing now, more broadly speaking, is, this sort of uber productive professionals that we're going to be moving towards being. So just, we're seeing, I listen to quite a lot of podcasts and stuff, and they talk about, maybe this software company that has grown, it's grown its turnover by like 1,000. It's gone from like, I don't know, £1 million turnover to like 10 billion or something. Yeah. And they're saying, and the size of the software development team is the same size. And you go, well, normally that team would grow at not the same rate, but grow at a vast rate. I'm sure their customer account managers and sales teams are growing at a fast rate to sort of achieve that growth in turnover and revenue. But the people doing the software development haven't grown, because software developers is one of those early areas for some organizations that AI has hit home and they've become uber productive, really, really productive, being able to produce far more than they were previously. They're at the cutting edge, some of those organizations and the software development department. So it's a bit of a weird analogy, but to sort of circle the circle, that's what we're seeing more and more now as I see it with the day-to-day tasks that we're asked to do. I don't feel like AI is really hitting home yet for recruiters in regards to making you much more productive, but I think it is coming. I'm going to do a little plug now, if you don't mind, for tomorrow's webinar. Let me just bring it through here. I've got it's exactly focused on that. And this is why my brain has gone to this analogy, is because I was working on this webinar last night. So I'll just show you one little thing. You're welcome to attend. It's obviously free. Here it is here. It's all about employer brand and AI. So it's all about like building a career site, researching your competitors, generating images, generating social media content, and just showing how, whereas that used to be quite a laborious task and take a lot of time, effort, you can build these systems to be, incredibly efficient. So feel free to sign up to that tomorrow. But the point I'm making, to come back to this, is past performance is an obvious place to go to. Bear that in mind. Look at it through different lenses, but also accept that the world we're moving into now, and very, very few organizations are there and very, very few recruitment departments are there, but the world we're moving into now does open up the capacity just to double the results, that sort of stuff, half the time to hire, do these types of things. Dramatic changes are possible. And we'll talk about that later on. We talked about BHAGs. So, okay, we'll come back to that. So, yeah, a couple of things here as well to mention. Sort of, obviously, I mentioned more employers are obviously data focused, but obviously it's an output focused labour market as well. More and more, obviously, people move jobs quicker. So more people look at it and think, this person can come in and give us this output. And that's what they look at as well. But one of the things you might be embraced, let me know in the chat if any of you guys have faced this, where you come in and there just isn't any data. It's like, well, how are we doing with recruitment? And people go, oh, we've never recorded this, we've never done that. The only thing you might be left with is like maybe invoices. It's the only track record of what's happened, or we've paid job boards, so we've been using that. Okay, I can go track down the job boards and see what analytics they've held. And then agencies have shown us when we've made placements. Okay, so I can sort of see, I guess what you're saying is who have been the most successful agencies in terms of placements. So that's useful. But as we touched on in session 1 last week, you can end up with too much data. The other end of not enough, and you can end up with too much. There is a Goldilocks to this clearly. And I'm going to just repeat the concept there, which is, if everything becomes a metric, and this is maybe what some of your colleagues might say, either within the team or maybe some of your managers, but you've got to remind people, if you say like, what are the things that, you want us to measure, and you give them a long list and they say, oh, but yeah, that's also important. Oh, but that's also important. If everything becomes a key metric, a KPI, key performance indicator, then nothing's a key performance indicator. These are just a load of things that we're generating for. We're not necessarily, if you give someone like 60 goals, they don't really have any focus. So they're probably not going to achieve anything. They just end up doing their job. So you're much better off giving them 6 or 3. So the obvious things are time, money, fairness, that sort of ethical, how ethical and fair are we being with our recruitment process? And obviously quality of hire, quality of interviews, the quality of the experience of the candidates coming into the process. That's an area where we don't see a lot of stuff measured, but we did cover it last week and talked about interview surveys and other types of surveys and things like you can do there. Okay, so looking at some other ideas then around benchmarking. First plug is to ask the sub 1000 community, or ask any community. You can go on LinkedIn obviously and say, hey, I'm looking for this, I'm looking to benchmark our organization about some sort of key metrics. Are there any other law firms between 200 to 500 staff that might be interested in, you could post it out and see if people come to you, or you could just share your things. Like, these are our numbers, what do people think? But I think people are very wary, understandably, of like sharing too much data in a public forum. So private communities might be better, and you might find there's more of an honest discussion going on in those private communities. People might be saying, yeah, my managers when I come in, we're setting ridiculous targets for me, and this is the process I use to sort of reset their expectations. And they're not going to say those things on LinkedIn, but there's a greater chance they'll do that in a private community where you guys can learn more from them. Now, there is an option, and I would definitely do this option, and I think it would work. We're doing something similar at the moment, which is having great sign up for us. I'll talk about that in a second. But this option simply says, you're recruiters. What do you need to find? And in my case, if I joined a 200 staff law firm and I'd not recruited for a law firm before, which I haven't, my first job would be, right, I want to benchmark ourselves. I want to understand, what good performance looks like. Now it might be that the direct competitor law firm just down the road, same size as us, who've hired 6 staff from us in the last year, and we've hired 5 of theirs, that might be a little bit too competitive. But what about the similar sized organization? If we're based in Milton Keynes and they're based in Leeds, we're not competitive to each other. Similar sized organization, both working in a sort of city, and you could argue whether Milton Keynes or Leeds is best. I'm a fan of Milton Keynes, that's where I'm born. Well, I'm born in London, lived in Milton Keynes, brought up in Milton Keynes. But anyway, so I would go and target and say, right, let me find similar organizations in Leeds and say, look, this is what I'm looking to do. I'm looking to bring a collection of people together that can share data. And like I say, we can agree what data we want to share and benchmark it. And we're going to be non-competitive. We're not going to be, I'm finding one, partner on this project based in Leeds. I'll find another partner based in Manchester. I'm going to find another partner based in Cambridge, Oxford, so and so. And we're, and that's what it's going to be. And, I'll put a little bit of legwork into this, but guess what? It won't take too much work. I bet for every sort of 6 people you message, 1 or 2 will be, yeah, I'm in. So it won't be too much effort. And, that can work in whatever context. Well, you can be quite a niche organization and you can be getting some good data. And it's the sort of thing that no one in your organization is probably asking you for. And you're able to say, look, okay, so here's our data. And when we compare ourselves to our benchmark cohort, you can see that, we're actually doing better here, but we need to improve there. And all your colleagues are going, sorry, what's the benchmark cohort? And you go, well, I've actually researched and agreed with 6 other organizations, similar size. You can see the notes in the appendix, and we're all sharing data now. So now, it's a great way of understanding where you're at and where you need to get to, okay? So that's one of the things we're doing. I'll mention this. I've mentioned this in the last session. I don't want to do another poll about it, but I'll mention it again. And I would just advise you to go to hireful.com VRT, vertical roundtables, if you're interested. We are running them all the time now. They're gaining a lot of traction. I'll explain what they are if you haven't heard about this before. If I go to hireful.com. So the hireful.com VRT actually is just a redirect. It takes you across to a Notion page where we're just sort of updating it all the time. And what we're doing is we're building round tables, so they get together monthly with your peers, essentially. You can sort of see it's based on each sector. So we've launched in not-for-profit, legal, education now, and we're building out in each of these areas. If you're in a really, really niche, you can just sign up for the other. And if you do something like completely very niche, we're never going to build a round table with 8 of your peers. We'll just find 8 similar-sized organizations or organizations who recruit in a similar type of way, and you'll be able to borrow and share ideas and borrow from them. But let me just click on the legal example here. So you can click in, you can read about the thing, you can see the agendas of what's coming up. We cover the first 3 sessions for the first 3 months, and then the last 3 sessions for the first cohort, the first 6 sessions you do. It's completely free, by the way. It'll be free for the second cohort and onwards and onwards and onwards. But the first 3 sessions are set up, relevant for your sector, hopefully. And the last 3, you decide, you tell us what you want to know more about, which could be like benchmarking and sharing data, la, la, la. And it talks about how it works. And then obviously down the bottom, you can see all the people that have signed up, who will be your peers that will likely be joining you in this. And actually, I was quite surprised because legal sector is quite competitive. And I've had some feedback from some of the first sessions in legal, and it's actually really collaborative. So fair play to them. So good luck to them. They've obviously worked out that these are the collaborative people that want to share and join forces together and learn from each other. So that's an idea that we're not really providing. We provide the framework, we ask the questions, but we mostly shut the hell up and let the delegates share amongst themselves because they're the experts, not us. So yeah, nice plug for that. Feel free to go to hireful.com VRT. If you've not signed up already, you can sign up, you can read more about it, and if it's relevant for you. The only thing we do ask is that you need to be at least 5 years experience within recruitment or HR, because obviously we're trying to put sort of, not necessarily ideally decision makers, but at least people who are like strongly influencing decisions. So sort of senior-ish. You don't have to be a recruitment manager, but you have to be sort of at least senior, so you can bring credible ideas and insights into that conversation. And if you're not that experienced, don't worry. We have something new coming that's available for everyone on a different type of level. That's coming next month. So watch this space. Okay, so that's a benchmark option. Other benchmark options you may not be aware of, or you may. So companies like Adzuna. So Adzuna is like a UK version of Indeed. I don't know whether they'd like that definition, but they're a bit smaller than Indeed, but they're a very impressive company in their own right. They're global now, but they started in the UK. And they've got lots of data around salaries and like the popularity of certain roles and things like this. So there's lots of data they've got around. But now, just to frame this correctly, this is the data that's been advertised. So this is the advertised salary. They don't know that obviously the salary that someone was eventually hired at. So yeah, but it's still very good data. And then you've got more benchmark data options such as Indeed. So yeah, Indeed is, I'd say, even more impressive than Adzuna. It's got more data, and they've got more developers and more techies to build more insightful tools. And their tools in this area, their hiring insights area, are actually, a lot of the problem with a lot of Indeed stuff sometimes is that it's good, but they throttle it and limit it. You have to pay. But actually, in this area, I think they just want to get you in and amongst Indeed's data and seeing what they, number of advertisers, that sort of stuff. So they give you a lot, really. There's a lot to be had here. So if you're not using this, I would encourage you to go and use it in your research. Don't forget, you can download one of the things I'll be doing some work on, because I did a poll the other day. Let me just bring this up on my LinkedIn. I'm just going to have to, I'll drag this through. I did a poll the other day on my LinkedIn. If I come from, just go to home on LinkedIn. Right, sorry, lots going on my LinkedIn. I did a poll the other day. It was about what people want to see, from future webinars, that sort of thing. And it was quite an interesting discussion, relevant for this session, because if I go find my posts activity, what popped up, we had some feedback that people were really interested in ChatGPT for beginners, but it was just one or two people that said that. So we thought, well, let's just test it out a little bit further. Sorry, guys, this is taking a little while. Let me just try that again. Oh, here we go. Right, fine. So yeah, we had our poll. If you can read this now, AI. So what are you looking for new content around AI? And actually, AI for analysis and reporting was popping up, which is really, really interesting. There's lots you can do on that. So I will run a session on that. The only reason I mention that is if you look at the slide here, you can download a PDF. So you can sort of gather a lot of information from Indeed. You can download that information. What you're able to do with, you might gather some information from there. You might gather some screenshots from Adzuna. You might go, you might pull a lot of this information together. You might have information from your own ATS, that sort of thing as well. So we're talking like, statistical data. What you're able to do now is you're able to come across, obviously, you can load that information into ChatGPT. I'm not going to do this now, but this will be the essence of the webinar we'll build in the future. You can upload files. You can push this in there. You'll also see now, this is, we've got a paid for ChatGPT account, and you'll see this deep research. So if you haven't seen the deep research stuff, and just because we've got it paid in, I think most recruiters are probably on a free account. So we're paying about $25 a month for that. And we get 10 searches. That's how limited it is. It's 10 searches, deep research. And I'm so precious, I haven't done it yet. I'm going to be doing it this evening, this afternoon probably, for tomorrow's session. So we're using it in tomorrow's session, some of the outputs from it for this employer brand analysis. But you can absolutely, I think, use it for like benchmarking data and those types of things. So I will be running a session on using AI for analysis. Now, that was a little segue. A little drop down, the little PDF definitely triggered my attention there. Anything you can pull out of a system, I'm then thinking, great, I can grab all these data sources, I can then, the analysis of all the PDFs and stuff that I'm doing, I can drop that into an AI model like ChatGPT and get it to analyze it, summarize it. And I can continually ask questions about it because it's got the PDFs there, maybe 5, 6 PDFs over. I can just go, so what does that mean here? And what is this? Tell me more about this. And it will just keep telling you the story as much or as little as you want. And then next up, Total Jobs does a really good hiring trends report, so feel free to check that out. Obviously, they are going beyond the data on their job board. They actually survey, 1,000 HR leaders, tell you what they're feeling every month, that sort of thing, aligning that to the metrics of what's going on within their, job board and what they're seeing in regards to candidate behaviour. And then I don't know if any of you have got access to LinkedIn Recruiter. Some people are still not aware of this. So LinkedIn produced this talent insights area. I'll click on the link and just show you what that looks like. And they were trying to sell this for a long while, mostly to big enterprise organizations. And I don't think it necessarily worked very well. So if I show you talent insights, if we've got any screenshots of it, how can I? Yeah, here we go. So it's like pipeline, diversity. It tells you like what skills are in what area, whether people are moving to that area, whether they're moving away from that area, who are the biggest employers, who are the biggest advertisers, the number of applications per job for that type of job in that area, for that type of skill in that area. So if you're sort of saying, well, do we recruit for this role in our Norwich, Cambridge or Birmingham department? You could sort of see like what the likely talent shortages are, where the opportunity lies, or even UK wide. You could say we're looking to recruit for this skill, it's in high demand, and it would say, look, these are the pockets where the demand is not quite as great as in other areas. So quite an interesting little tool. You can get lots of good insights from it. Once again, I would probably be taking lots of screenshots from that, saving it into a file, and then feeding that into AI. Probably not, strictly speaking, LinkedIn within LinkedIn's terms, but if you're doing it on a small level, no one's going to really mind. So so that's a really good tool. Now that comes free if you're on a LinkedIn Recruiter package. So if you've got a LinkedIn Recruiter license, which I think is between about £5,000 to £7,000 a year, they vary it a little bit. But I wouldn't buy that. I wouldn't buy a LinkedIn Recruiter license to get access to this. But if I had a LinkedIn Recruiter license, I would definitely use LinkedIn Talent Insights. So hopefully that's something you might want to look at. If anyone uses that, let me know in the chat. I'll be interested to hear that. I'm going to show you this now in a second as well. You've obviously got the census data. I know it's 4 years old. And if we think about what's happened, you can think about a lot's happened in the world in the last 4 years. It feels like a lot's happened in the world in the last 4 days. But there will be some, probably some sort of geopolitical shifts of labour markets really in this country, which would be things such as obviously the Ukraine war. We've seen obviously Ukraine refugees come over. We've seen refugees from Hong Kong. We've seen various legislative changes in visas and stuff, and and things like that, and work visas and student visas and stuff. So I think since 2021, the labour market has changed subtly. Not subtly, actually a reasonable degree based on what it normally would do over 4 years. But actually, when you still come to it, I'm going to show you this in a second, the census data is still incredibly good data, particularly to understand the demographics of your catchment area. So we're based here in Northamptonshire, our head office. I'll show you that in just a second now. And yes, if I say, look, how has the demographics changed? People who've if we talk about people that might have come here on refugees from like Hong Kong and the Ukraine, well, certainly we know from the Ukraine there'll be more females than males, because a lot of the males either had to stay or would stay to obviously help with the war effort. So that might, if there's Ukrainian refugees in the Northamptonshire area, and I'm sure there would be, and to be clear, they're very welcome, then they might they'll have a bias towards being female and actually children. So that will slightly change the census data, but only subtly, not on any huge level. So because the census is so widespread and so comprehensive, it's still an incredibly good source of data to understand your local market. And you can go onto the census and you can download a data set as an Excel spreadsheet. You can get it for like a region like Northamptonshire or East Midlands, or you can get it all the way down to like a small council ward. You know, you think about that. You think about how small that would be. It's, you know, very, very small, really. Okay, so I'm going to just show you that live, because what we have done is we've built this into our applicant tracking system. I'll just show you this live. Now, I did say I'm going to show you one customer's data, as in hireful's customers data. Unfortunately, we don't recruit a lot, certainly not last year. Last year with the economy, it was a bit slow for us. So we've done a bit of recruitment for some senior roles, actually. So you'll see, this is looking at age. So we've got 179 applicants that applied to us that shared their diversity data to give us to confirm their age, and you can sort of see how that sort of splits out here. And then what we're able to do now, because we're based sort of Northamptonshire, Bedford sort of way, I can type this in and I can find there's 2 listings for Northamptonshire. This is just the way the census splits things up. We, you know, there is North Northamptonshire and West Northamptonshire. That does include South and East. And if I go to Bedford, you'll see Bedfordshire and Bedford come up. So now we're able to compare our applicants, the age of our applicants versus almost 1 million people from the census to see what the local population looks like. And if we, the bubbles look lovely, they're probably more interesting, but actually the bar chart's probably easier to read. And you can see that age is a pretty even split. We know 16 to 20 is a smaller split, but it's only a 4-year age group. But it's a pretty even split from the people that were given 10-year blocks to, yeah? So, you know, it's, I'd imagine if you went to Devon and Cornwall, you might see sort of gaps and differences. Maybe I could throw it up. I might just do that in a second now. But you can see, now for us, there isn't enough data here to show you, but you get the principle. If we're looking at, we'd have to really be looking at thousands of applicants ideally, and most of your organizations would easily generate that. Then you can sort of see, you can compare. Are we attracting a diverse audience when it comes to age? And that would be how you're looking at it here. Okay, let me just quickly get rid of these. I'll clear these, and let me just get rid of Northampton as well. And I'm just going to throw in them. Yeah, I'm just throwing. I haven't done it, so now I've said it. I'm really interested because I think Bournemouth is meant to be sort of the retirement home of the country, is it not? So let's just throw in Bournemouth and see what Bournemouth does to age. No, Bournemouth is pretty much the same as well. What do I know? I'm going to have one last go with Cornwall or something. We'll see. Cornwall plus Bournemouth. Yeah, okay, now it's got a bit older, but it's not huge. Subtle variations because we are talking about hundreds of thousands of people. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea just to say, you know, the census data is useful. Now, I did mention this in the last session, because the last session I spoke about the role of the AI in the analysis. Because if you think about that, what you're going to have to do, probably every year, you're going to have to look, or maybe twice a year, you should really be looking at all of the demographics, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, all of those demographics, you know, to see how well are we doing as an organization, attracting people compared to the local population. Now, if you do that, that's doable if you've got one major site, like we've pretty much got. You know, we've got one head office, we've got a few people dotted around, but really one main head office, and we've also got another one in Madrid. But yeah, but what happens if you've got 12 offices? And that is a big job. And that's where I now see the AI analysis coming through in the future, whereby it will just run the numbers constantly for you and tell you when there's something like an outlier, or tell you a summary of like, everything looks fine, you could be doing a bit better over here, but it's broadly in line with what we expect. You know, that might be what you're looking at. Because when you also break that down, when it comes to like benchmarking, you might also want to go, well, okay, so we're doing okay for like age and gender and these things, that's great. Now let's look at it, if you've got thousands and thousands of applicants coming through, how does that differ if we look at when we're hiring for the IT department versus the sales department versus this department? How does that differ? You know, and are we finding that we don't seem to attract the right people over here when we're looking for these types of roles. So yeah, so it goes beyond simply who you're attracting. It really is focused on who is the catchment area, which is a good example when we come to benchmarking of you know, going beyond your own data and asking the right questions. Because you might look at your demographics and go, oh, they're all fine. And you go, well, they're not fine if you have a look at the actual local community. There might be groups you're massively underrepresented. Okay, so we've done the hireful ATS data. So yeah, let's move on to using data to get to make strategic decisions. So obviously this is what we want to move away from, and hopefully your organizations are moving away from that as an organization. So it's like, bring your evidence. So it isn't a case of someone saying, oh, the manager says, oh, we've just had someone who's turned down an offer. We offered them 45. They're on six. So-and-so down the road has offered them £60,000. We are completely on the wrong plane when it comes to thinking about salaries. Like, well, are you? Or is that just sort of a rumor of what one person got when they added their salary plus their bonus and just told you, oh, they're giving me 60? Is that, even if it was accurate and completely truthful and evidence-based, it's one example. So, you want to move away from dealing with individual pieces of data and examples which can sort of make you feel like you're not, for example, not paying big enough salaries, not keeping up with the competition, whatever, to actually, real gathering data, having a system to gather data, and then being able to reflect on that data to make proper decisions going forward. So that also helps because it makes you less prone to unconscious bias. Okay. So it's easy to say, oh, we're doing this, we're doing that. But if the whole organization starts becoming focused around, let's look for the evidence. Yeah, we're not just talking about numbers, but we're talking about when you're in interviews of candidates and stuff, and they're, like someone post interview, someone might say, I don't know, I didn't really feel like they really they had strong communication skills. It was like, well, okay, well, what made you think that? So all the time, whether it's looking at for a number on a spreadsheet or you're looking for, like someone to reinforce a comment that they're making, to ensure that their people are not using their gut, they're not being impacted unduly by unconscious bias. It's a matter of getting them to sort of look for the evidence. Yeah. And if you're making a proposal like, I think we should, revamp our career site, our employer brand's underperforming, these are ideas, these are concepts. Some of them are very hard to back up with evidence, particularly employer brand is a slippery, it's like nailing jelly to a wall to some degree. But actually, there is evidence, there is data, there is things you can look at. And I think one of the key things is the trend of that data. Yeah, that gives you a better idea as to sort of, this is why, because you might feel the outcome of something, like it's getting tougher to recruit, but you don't necessarily know what for, because multiple forces will be impacting that, positive and negative, to produce that end outcome. And you might be measuring that outcome. It's taken us much longer, and there's more roles that go unfilled for longer, and we're having to use agencies more. Whatever those answers are, you can sort of see the outcomes. But if you're not measuring everything, then you might be looking at the wrong piece of data and assuming that that's producing the big impact when perhaps it's not. So I mentioned it last week, but we're big fans of scorecards. And I think scorecards, so we have a system of running our small business here it's called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. I won't bore you with that. That is another webinar that I wouldn't be knowledgeable enough necessarily to deliver for another day. But it does mean that within each departmental meeting, there's a set format to do it. We're a little bit flexible on it, but there's a set format. And one aspect of that is to reflect on the data. So every single department meeting, which happens weekly, we reflect on the data. Now, sometimes what we do, which I think is an important step with data, is to say, let's not look at the data in a weekly basis. Let's look at it on a monthly basis. So you might not look at it every week, or you might just chunk your data into 4 sections and then look at the monthly data for a certain section each week, if you see what I'm doing. So if you've got regular meetings, I do think it would be good to actually reflect on the data. People can look at that data scorecard. I'm going to talk about this one in a second, you can see. They can look at that data scorecard and they can then think about that in advance. Are there any issues from this? Are there any headlines that are good things to, oh, we've just hit a record number of these, any positive things that are coming out that you want to reflect upon? And then you can go, yeah, that's great. How did we do that, by the way? Because that might surprise you. So you can the numbers can be really useful in helping you to understand performance and dig through to understand the why behind the performance and the results. So yeah, so we reflect on those results. If we look at this one here, so it just shows the different ways of looking at things. So we've got on the top line, we've got interviews booked every month, and then we've got offers accepted below that, okay? You can also see the average. So the average number of interviews booked is 18, and the average number of offers accepted is 4.5, essentially. So when we look at it and we go, wow, this is really great. We're accepting lots of offers. We can sort of see, that the more recent times is really good. Previously, it wasn't as good. But actually, if you look at it, we're in October, we're still booking 19 interviews, only 4 offers accepted. Okay, well, and then 21 and 5 in November. You're sort of looking at those two as a whole, you're actually getting people, getting people in front of the managers, but something's going wrong. Now, you need to measure that to understand what that's going wrong. Could be you're not getting the right people in front of those managers. Could be that the managers are so desperate they're saying, just, where are my interviews? And you're going, oh, these people aren't quite good enough, but I will give them a go because we're quite desperate now. This role's been live for a while or something. Or it could be that maybe your candidate experience is not right. Maybe your employer brand is not right. The whole process. So did you make more offers? So what I might be looking at here, so like, what's the offer decline rate beneath this? Yeah. So we could see that actually the number of offers made is actually pretty good. So I would be measuring, just to be clear, not offers made, not offers declined. I'd be looking at offers made, offers accepted. So it could be that what we're seeing is over here, the number of offers made was similar, but they just weren't getting accepted. Okay. And then that tells you need to think about why is that? Let's have a look at why the offers were declined. Let's look at maybe some tactics we can do, like improving the candidate experience. So by the time we get the candidate through to the point where we say, we'd like to offer you the job, they've had such a good experience. They've been fed all the right information at the right time. They've been slowly cultivated around the story of your organization and why you're a great employer for them. I say they trust you and they really know and like you. And then the job is pretty much done. Okay. Oh, and there's the interview to offer ratios. You can sort of see ratios, as I mentioned last week, ratios can be really important as well. So yeah, you want to be putting the ratio beneath that. I forgot that was there, to be honest. Okay. So yeah, so it is about trusting the process. I think the point we're trying to make here, and this is, you will see this with sports coaches quite a lot, whether that's a football coach, tennis coach, rugby coach, a lot of the time, their mindset, obviously they're under pressure, and you'll see their mindset might be very much around when they're speaking after a performance, after a match, they'll be talking about the performance because that's the bit they focus in on. Yeah. Now, if they're under huge pressure, might be about to lose their £1 million a year job or something, they probably are very, very focused on the result as well. But really, they focus on the performance because they can't control the result. Yeah. They can influence their performance, which will influence the result. And that's what they focus in on. And that's what we're talking about really today, is to really, focus in on the underlying stuff because that's what drives the overall performance. Okay, and now I need to talk about goals. I won't tend to spend too long on SMART goals because I'm sure if you're above the age of 25 on this session, which I imagine most of you are, if you haven't seen or read or heard about SMART goals, I'd be surprised. But in simple terminology, SMART goals are just well-defined goals. They've got all the key aspects you would expect. So, they can be measurable and understandable. They're the right ones. They've got time aspects on them. They're not just vague, essentially. They're specific in simple terms. And obviously, you need to make sure your goals are the goals of the organization. So you should be aligned. So, a good recruitment manager or HR director comes in and says, well, where are you taking the organization? If they've done a good recruitment exercise with you in your hiring process, then you would have been sold on the mission, the vision of where the organization is going. And then, you will then be able to see, well, look, you've got a very clear mission, understand what you're trying to do here. Therefore, I understand what my job is to deliver this over here, which helps contribute towards the mission. So everything should be aligned. Yeah, everyone should be on the same page to understand what success looks like. And that can differ, for some organizations, it will be very, very money delivery, productivity focused. And for others, it will be a balance of that. We want to make sure that we're getting good value for our money, but we want to make sure we're hiring the right people for a long-term culture fit. We want to make sure that we're being absolutely fair, and we want to be measuring that fairness and efficacy, and everyone's getting a good shot at working here, and everyone feels like this is a place where they could apply and work and succeed. So different organizations will have a different focus, and sort of those underlying goals will differ depending on where the organization is going. So, I do follow a lot of AI stuff at the moment, and you see this sort of space race almost of like all the AI companies are throwing billions and billions of pounds into it, trying to be, the biggest and the best AI company available. I would imagine internally the culture is just get it done. Don't worry about how much it costs, just get it done. That's going to, drive a very different set of functions around recruitment than we would normally see in other organizations. And then I really love this book and the whole ethos behind it. It's called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? It's around sort of Olympic rowers and the Olympic winning strategy. And it's all around focused around like having a North Star, that sort of one direction, that one overarching goal that everyone is focused on. And every sort of decision that you're making within the organization comes down to, will it help us achieve this North Star goal? Yeah. So will it make the boat go faster? There's a really good documentary series around the Olympic four, Pinsett, Redgrave. Unfortunately, I can't remember. Cracknell was one of them, and there's another blonde-haired guy. I can't remember him, unfortunately. But some very famous rowers, and they followed them around doing a documentary on them. And I think Steve Redgrave was saying that, just an example of their sole focus on will it make the boat go faster. He was saying that if I'd done a heavy training session, and he's still an amateur athlete essentially. He might go to the shops with his wife to like do this supermarket shop or something, and if he feels tired, he'll just sit in the car and he won't even help her unload the shopping out of the trolley into the back of the car, because he has to say, my body needs to recover, I'm not doing this. And it means being I think a lot of athletes are incredibly selfish. I'm not encouraging selfishness, but I'm just using an example of that single-mindedness at the very elite level to say everything is focused on, will it make the boat go faster? So having that North Star, you probably don't go quite as single-minded and selfish as that, but having a North Star to know where the organization is going and to then be constantly reflecting on, is what I'm doing now, this week, this month, is that the very best set of targets and production decisions and tasks to help us achieve that, and then filtering that down for your team can be really, really impactful. Yeah, and then obviously there is that element of like breaking it down to smaller things. I used to have a little note on my laptop saying, is what I'm doing now helping me to achieve my monthly goals? Simple as that. It's such a silly little thing, but it just made sure, because I can be very distracted. You probably see me distracted in this session. So it's my nature, made sure that you can really focus in. So what can I influence today? What am I setting daily goals and priorities, and making sure that they're all aligned to those overall organization goals, departmental goals, etc., etc. So anyone you're managing should absolutely be doing that, as I see it. Should be setting daily goals and priorities. And once again, it's a bit like the KPIs. If they're setting too many, here's my list today. You can't quite see it, but there it is. I actually write them down, which is a bit low tech for me, but it works. If they're setting too many, then that doesn't work. So I set mine, I write down stuff, and people give me stuff during the day, I write it onto the pad, but I only ever star 3 tasks, and they're the ones I absolutely have to do. Okay. Another thing that can be useful from a goal setting perspective is not getting distracted by new ideas. So the same EOS system we work to, because there's a weekly meeting, if we start getting into a conversation, as a management team, leadership team, whatever, then we will shut it down quite quickly in some circumstances and go, that sounds like an issue. Let's discuss it as a team on Monday. If it doesn't have an urgency element to it, then discussing it in a set environment with the members of the rest of the department, when people might bring ideas, that's good. And what you're also doing, you're making decisions about, should we do this? You're making that alongside of all the other things that have come up in the week to say, should we do this? So you're not making it on its own merits. It's like there's a cost of opportunity. You can't do everything. So then you're deciding which are the things we should do out of the 6 ideas that have come in this week that have been discussed, or the 6 ideas come in this month, or whenever you do your meetings. So we have quarterly bigger targets as well. So like, that sounds like what we call a rock. Let's get that onto the potential rock list. It's definitely interesting. Add a few notes and then forget about it, because we're focused on this quarter, and we'll look at it in 6 weeks, or in this case 4 weeks, when the quarter's over, and decide is that something we want to do next quarter? So yeah, not getting distracted by new ideas is really key. And then you can really focus in on picking out the right ones at the right time. Yeah, and then you could obviously completely disregard the past performance. This is what I was alluding to at the very start. This BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. You may have heard of it already. It's a long-term strategic goal, and emotionally compelling is what it's meant to be. And these are for the organization, essentially. You could pick a BHAG for the recruitment department. I think that's possible, definitely. I'll give you some examples here, like Nike's BHAG. There'll be more to it, but the headline was Crush Adidas. And obviously Microsoft is every organization on the planet to achieve more. And I think Microsoft's original one was about every home to have a PC within it. And then Google's to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So yeah, that's a headline, a big goal, but actually when you get to the actual numbers, what they're trying to do, it's huge, a huge lift they're trying to do. So these are highly motivating, emotional. They're meant to sort of, really make people feel it in their gut. They're meant to provide focus and alignment for the whole organization, and encourages innovation and out-of-the-box thinking, and it helps to have a long-term inspirational goal. You can read more about them there. I was on a course with a load of other fast growth companies, and one of the other founders was from a company, and they're called, well, I can find them actually here. I'll find them on the web here. They're called Toast Ale. So they make beer, essentially, craft ale. And he was telling us, he had a BHAG. It was absolutely amazing, this story of these guys. So they make beer from surplus bread that's donated from supermarkets for free, essentially. Yeah. So they're using surplus bread that isn't, going to be used, and they take the money from that and they drive it into solving food poverty. Okay. So an amazing organization, and they were doing amazing. Their numbers are going great, and they're signing up these things. But they had this absolutely crazy BHAG that was, like they were not even getting close to, because they'd just gone with an absolutely crazy one, and then what that forced them to do was spin off into other areas. So they were like selling the food pellets, and then helping like these major, beer manufacturers to create their versions of this, and things like that. So that, but also making money back from that, but driving more money into their plan of actually solving, food poverty, and actually making, use of this unused bread. So, just by forces them to change the way of thinking, which is exactly what a BHAG's meant to do. If you're working to the normal processes, the normal things you're doing, you will never achieve a BHAG. It is about like, how do we do this? Think completely outside the box. The equivalent of like a Fosbury flop, if you know your high jump. They used to do the high jump with just kicking over it, and now obviously they go over on their back. So like, you have to find, if you want to get over 2.20 meters, you're not going to be able to just jump over that, from a from a straight up start. You've got to probably go over it with a completely different technique. I'm getting very distracted now, but that's the sort of thing we're talking about, a completely different way of thinking. I struggled in research to find these. I think there is some around DEI. There's like, whether they're BHAGs or not, they're sort of more, they're certainly big goals that force people to change. So you will see like DE&I goals that are, incredibly challenging for organizations, and deliberately so. I do think it is very few organizations, particularly around DE&I, are willing to put, targets out there that they're likely going to miss. And that's the idea of a BHAG. It's so challenging that you're likely going to miss it. But actually, by missing it, you do pretty well anyway. So the DE&I example here, you can see 50% of graduate hires, and then 40% female partners by 2027. That's a huge movement from EY's Sydney office, from what I was reading. I actually asked AI this morning as to how well they were doing with it, and they said actually the reports we're seeing is that they're not doing so well. And so yeah, you do find sometimes these DE&I targets are big leaps, and fair play to the organisations that are brave enough to put it out there and do that. The obvious one is no more agencies. I have seen that come in. People come in and go, right, that's it. We're not using agencies. And it's like, okay, great. Well, have you got a team staffed up to sort of fulfill that need, or is the organisation able to function well, knowing that you won't have people in position, and once people leave for a much longer period of time? If the answer to those questions are yes, then great. But obviously agencies are filling a need. They obviously perhaps use too much in plenty of scenarios, but yeah, you do see this on quite a lot. But sometimes for some organizations, making that cut of saying, that's it, we're not using agencies no more, it forces everyone to align and go, right, we have to commit to direct sourcing now. We have to commit to getting this right. Yeah, managers have to be on the ball, and doing things and engaging with recruitment now. They can't just be getting lazy and just sending, engaging lots and lots of agencies and paying lots and lots of fees for almost every single role. Yeah, so if you can't stop the sort of use of agencies here and there, and it's all, and you absolutely want to or need to, then yeah, maybe cold hard stop is the only way to go. I say that having got an agency, and I still sort of do, not directly. Okay, so that finishes up the session, guys. Thank you for sticking with us. Here are the takeaways as I see it. I think you need to build data review steps into your internal meetings and then look for issues and trends that you can discuss and bring through that forward, positive things, but also negative things. You need to seek out benchmarking data, and that might be a challenge and a real stretch. You need to watch out for my future AI analysis webinar that's going to be coming up. That might be useful for you as well. And hopefully, I like SMART goals. SMART goals are good, undoubtedly. But think also, if you're already, nailing down the SMART goals, you want to get to that next level, think about that sort of, it doesn't have to be a BHAG. I just left that as a bit of a sort of inspirational piece. But think about those next level goals that you can set about whether that's sort of, North Stars, and how do you make sure that everyone's aligned and really thinking about their role and how you can really focus on that. Okay, thank you for today, guys. I'll throw it out and see if there are any questions at all. I haven't seen any so far, but I'll give it a minute to see if there are any others. I'd also point out that we're doing a wall of love. I'll show this on our website. So basically, if you're leaving the webinar now, you can review us. You can give a score out of 10. And actually, what we also do then is you can add a comment. But if you add your name next to the comment, then we actually know who you are, and we will add you to our wall of love, which is down here. So you can sort of see all the feedback is dropped in there. So yeah, we're keen to gather feedback and just make sure we put a lot of effort into these webinars, make sure people see that it's actually they're good webinars, hopefully. And yeah, and then other than that, I'll plug it again. If you fancy coming on to tomorrow's webinar, or if you can't make it, but you want the recording and the slides and all the other templates I'll be sharing, then register, sign up for that, and we'll send it out to you if you can't attend it. And yeah, other than that, thank you very much for attending today, guys. I really appreciate it. And good luck with all your goal setting and recruitment analytics. Cheers.